Good afternoon and welcome to Cold Chain Insights, the podcast that focuses everything temperature controlled logistics for the pharmaceutical industry. My name's Thomas Hunt, and this week I'm delighted to be joined by Stefan Braun, who is Managing Director of SmartCAE Software. Stefan, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Great to be here, Thomas. So nice to see you also in the digital world after a lot of conferences where we met. Yeah, so it's a pleasure for me. I saw your podcasts in the past where a lot of people are in, which I know. So it's a nice pleasure to take part on your podcast now.
Great. It's great to have you on. Really a pleasure to have you on there, Stefan. So we've known each other a long time. I think a really good place to start for listeners is you've obviously founded SmartCA, I think 25 years ago, and insight into those first 3 or 4 years of founding the business, why you founded the business, how you came about doing that, and what those first couple of years looked like at the start.
Yeah, you see, we are not a typical, let's say, startup company, Methuselah startup. When you look at this, now we started in automotive industry a long time ago, but since 2014 we do only cold chain. So, and we worked before, on modeling on cars, on climate control of cars, and all complicated stuff on flight paths of electrons. In computer tomographs, a lot of different things. And we came by accident in the cold chain industry because it was 2014. I visited a conference about energy efficiency. And there was a talk from a company which shows cold chain is a relevant element for pharma. And to be honest, I had no clue at this time what cold chain is. And had no clue that it had some relevance, to be honest, because you look at your tablet in your bathroom and say, store it above 30 degrees. And at this time, for me, it was completely new. And then I spoke with a lot of people, because at this time we modeled fridges and freezers for the household industry, and understood, okay, moving a box from A to B, it's not so complicated different from having a fridge or a freezer. Okay, a little bit different, but not in principle different. And we had all the modeling available. The technology was founded. So then we thought, let's see how this looks like. And then I went to a IQPC conference. I remember it was in Luxembourg, so a longer time ago, and spoke with all the vendors and a lot of pharma companies, and told them, when you can do such a test in the digital world in 10 minutes on your laptop, would this be helpful for you? Or you stay still in your climate chamber test, which takes you, 72 hours or 120 hours or whatever. And then there was a lot of positive feedback, and we thought, it's good. And then we had one first pharma company, which were super interested in, and we started with them. That's
Nice.
That's a little bit in a nutshell how we come and why we come in this industry. It was not really planned. It was never on my agenda. And yeah, that's a little bit the base from our history.
And what surprised you most when you came from automotive and you had to switch across to temperature controlled or pharma? What was the differences?
The main difference is, I was sometimes surprised that no technical details were available. I mean, the typical thing is, you have all the PCMs, you produce PCMs, but when I ask some vendors, can you give me the latency of your PCM? They looked at me with big eyes and say, we test this in a chamber, and how long the box survives, that's the lifetime. And when you go to automotive industry, it would be the same. If you go to BMW, ask them how much fuel you have in the tank, and they will tell you, try it out, how long the car will drive. So this was for me the most surprising at the beginning, that the knowledge of these type of information, or the willingness to share, was really small. I mean, that was for me something I understand. There is a lot of magic behind to make a PCM. Magic, chemistry, whatever, you name it. But the technical properties, how much energy you can store in a PCM, how the latency curve looks like, that's not something what is, super secret, because you can also buy it and measure it by yourself. I mean, it's the same when you buy a car and you say, okay, I test how long it drives. So, and I mean, this is why, for me, this was the most surprising element when we came in this industry.
Right. Okay. And if we look at sort of the cold chain landscape in general, you've been in the sector for, as you say, around 12 years
Yes.
or so. Where do you still see the most common failure points for temperature control logistics today? Where, with your customers, are you seeing the most problems? Or are there any surprising problems that are coming up that are new?
Surprising problems sometimes, this typical sentence, all the excursions happens on the tarmac. I
Hmm.
mean, you know the sentence, what is also coming from IATA and all, the tarmac is the critical part, but but this is sometimes not the reality, because I think that the people on the tarmac are sometimes the poor guys, because they have the excursion, but sometimes it happens much earlier. You know,
Hmm.
you condition your PCMs wrong in a warehouse and have not enough energy, and then you arrive in Dubai airport and you have an excursion because there's war. But the problem
Hmm.
occurs before. So I think this is for me some learning that not always so clear.
Yeah, that's a good point. And how has the industry changed in that last sort of 10, 12 years that you've been here for the good? And what hasn't really changed enough in your perspective?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What has really changed is the understanding that a digital way is really very supporting.
Hmm.
When we started 12 years ago, people really told us, "Ah, we don't need you. We make a test. That's the only truth, and we make a test shipment. If the test shipment make it, we are happy." So this has now really changed. You know, we do a lot of webinars and educate people about technology. Um, and there's now a much better understanding what technology can really drive, and
Hmm.
how technology can really improve this. And I think this is what we found as a very positive element from the 12 years. It's not about us, it's about understanding that technology can really optimize this in a way what is never done before. I mean, that's the main element what I see. And we get also from all our industry peers um, a lot of positive feedback to get more education. That people also ask more educated questions, like
Mm.
the DCM question. You know, now it's a common standard. Give me your data sheet of these PCM and
Hmm.
show how the latent curve looks like. So I think
Hmm.
that is also what we hope to drive. Education is key, and
Mm.
this is for me a little bit.
How educated do you think the customers are, the end users are, in terms of the technology? As you've mentioned PCM there a few times, or if you're combining insulation, are they becoming more and more advanced in their sort of knowledge on those materials and how their weaknesses and the strengths of them, or is there
Yeah.
still a lot of education there?
Thomas, I think so, because what we learned from all our webinars, and we did this now since 2 years plus, and we had more than 3,000 people in our webinars joining, and a lot of people are coming back and back because we always have new topics. And I think this education is also key to ask qualified questions, and this is what we hoped with our things around to cover. And,
Hmm.
and I think from this point, I'm very happy because I feel um, discussions gets more specific. People think about what is the shape of your PCM curve. Is it
Hmm.
like this or like this? And is a PCM always hibernating? Yes, but if the insulation is too good, then it's not hibernating. So I think
Hmm.
more the facts coming in.
Hmm.
There's not so much. I'd say it in English, smoke and mirror. Is it
Hmm.
right? So yeah, this is a little bit what we see.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into the Smart CA software itself and the core of what your expertise. So, for
Mhm.
listeners who may be new to the concept, and some might still be, how would you explain digital cold chain simulation in simple terms? What is it that the business does and offers?
That's a very good question. So in simple terms, is you have a digital model of the packaging system, what behaves like the real box in the digital
Hmm.
world, digital twin, how it named. And then you have the digital twin of the supply chain. And then what we do is relatively straightforward. We run thousands or 10,000 of virtual shipments. And for each
Hmm.
of the shipments, we know what is the temperature in your left vial, maybe in the box. And is this in your spec or not? And then we know from 10,000 shipments, 5% or 3% made it not.
Hmm.
Then we know that's the fail rate. That's in principle what we do. We mimic the same what you do in the real world with a digital twin. So
Right.
it's not super complicated. It's only shifting from the real world into the digital world. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. And what types of decisions can a simulation replace? It might be the wrong question, but can a simulation replace compared with the common traditional testing methods that people are used to, like chamber testing, etc.?
Yeah, that's a very brilliant question, because maybe not all people like it, but I would say 95% will be replaced.
Hmm.
Because what I feel, what really makes super sense when you make a physical shipment to track the lane or trace the lane, that is that service what you book, the service what you get. Is the assumption right? For this, it's nice to use maybe a test shipment real-time device and understand how the supply chain looks like.
Hmm.
But this is the element what could be combined there. But the rest you can do completely digital. Look now what we have. We have crisis in the supply chain due to the war in Iran.
Hmm.
What make a lot of disruption in the supply chain. In a digital world, you can easily find out, okay, how my trade lanes are influenced by this. Is my packaging still right?
Mm.
And this is something what really is different. If you
Mm.
want to do a test, you have to make a test. But how many tests you can do? It's very limited. It's cost intensive. It's labor intensive. So this is why the digital will never replace the physical completely.
Mm.
And this is also not, I think, the target. Look at automotive industry. You make all the plannings in the digital world, but at the end of the day, if you go to the BMWs of the world, they build a car that costs them a lot of money and crash a real prototype. What costs you a
Hmm.
million? But they are
Mm.
very confident that this test will make it. So the test is only to prove what you also learn in the digital world. And this is what I see in our industry the same. You will
Yeah.
always have a test. And I think also an agency will always see at the end of the day one test shipment, only to
Mm.
prove it. But we
Hmm.
all know statistically, if you make 3 shipments and they make it, is it really the reality or is it sometimes the luck?
Yeah, 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 for sure.
Yeah,
The problem with real life shipments is most shipments don't have a problem. Most shipments aren't
yeah.
exposed to an extreme event where really that's where the test comes in, isn't it?
And Thomas, I think, and also when you make these test shipments and all the logistics parties knows, oh, this is a critical test shipments. Maybe they had it not differently, but they will take a little bit more care on this, maybe as
Mm.
in the normal world, because this is for qualifying a lane. We
Hmm.
should make it as smooth as possible.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
and they're not going to sort of purposely force an sort of excursion or high temperature risk or extended
yeah,
tarmac time for a test. So I think
yeah.
that's always a problem. And I think one of the questions that people often have in the industry is that they've always reverted to chamber testing. Climate chambers is always
Mhm,
where the industry is focused. And obviously, you've come in with a new over the last 10 years way of doing things that rapidly speeds up validation. Obviously, that's one of the
mhm,
major things that you're offering. And how accurate? I think the question people have got and the concern is they often run your simulations alongside their own chamber testing. They want to see both. And is
mhm.
there still a lack of confidence in the software where you feel there shouldn't be a lack of confidence? And how accurate is the simulations in your experience over the last 10 years at predicting real world temperature excursions? How confident should we be?
Yeah, that's a serious question. So I would say it's typically in the same range like your triple test.
Hmm.
So if you have a box which have a high tolerance, you can see also in a triple test. So this means some parameters are not always the same. So this is I think the main topic. What I see is this is the main reason for differences. But if you have a box which is very good to reproduce or a blanket which you can reproduce very good, then the digital model have the same level of accuracy. So that's what I see. So to give a number, I would say plus minus a degree. And if you have I don't know, a 96-hour profile, what you pass, I would say plus minus 3, 4 hours, 5 hours. So,
Mm.
but this depends a little on the variance. If you have, let's say, a cool pack, what is crazy buckling? Then it's also hard in your triple test that all the buckling is the same. If we know the cool packs buckle always in the same way, we can
Hmm.
mimic this. But
Yeah.
this is, I think, the production tolerances and these things.
Hmm.
This is
Hmm.
what you also have in your, or also where you put the logger. Can you do always the logger on the same position in your triple test? Because when you
Hmm.
compare a digital model with the testing, then it's important to know, is in the digital world my logger at the same position as in my real world?
Hmm.
And these are the things where differences. But I think what really comes in is not these one triple test what you replace. You notice the most time you save with the non-working tests. If you make a new box, a new design of a rubber blanket, of a
Hmm.
pet shipper, how many tests you need to find the design what
Hmm.
survives in your climate chamber? That's where you lose most of the time. This is the critical element
Yeah.
where most of the time is gone.
But why do people? I agree, and so a lot of the big packaging companies have 6, 7, 8, 10 climate chambers, and
Mhm.
it takes huge amount of resource and effort to run these tests in the chambers because that's what a lot of pharma customers still want to see. But is there any reason, in terms of talking personally from my own experience of using Smart CAE, we actually calibrated the chamber testing that we had and the pack outs against the software, and we fine tuned it so we knew it was giving almost the exact result that we were seeing in the chamber with the exact load and everything else. So we could actually fine tune your system to give us almost a complete mirror, like a digital twin of a chamber test. And
Mhm,
then, as you say, we can now run models in, multiple models in a week very quickly for customers, and it's
mhm.
speed up everything we do. And is that something that packaging companies should be looking at in terms of trying to build out the models based on their chamber testing so they can rapidly give customers the same information? Because really, if the information is accurate, there's no reason to use a chamber.
No, no, this is what we see. Most of the global relevant packaging companies use our software to
Mm-hmm.
do this. So the test is more for the final confirmation because when you have then the box built, then you want to see maybe a final climate chamber test. But we were sometimes joking because I think last year we ran around 1 million simulations. So
Mm-hmm.
and this means we need 10,000 climate chambers to doing this in the real world, and they're running 24/7 the whole year.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm not sure if so many climate chambers exist in the world to do all these tests. And I think this is why it's not replacing, but it's adding on.
Mm,
All your climate chambers will be populated the whole time. But now you need not to buy more climate chambers because more customers will come. And the typical scenario is often you have a box built or a blanket, and
mm-hmm.
then your customer comes, "Oh, I want to run it not against the ISTA profile. I want to run it against my own company profile."
Mm-hmm.
So this is something what is then very, very simple because change the profile, run it, and show in your meeting how it performs.
Mm-hmm.
If you go the old way, you have to go back in your chamber and say, "Oh, we can give you a result in, I don't know, 2 days, 3 days. This is how long the test takes." Then we process a little bit data and put it in a PowerPoint and show you.
Yeah, yeah.
If you can sit in your meeting and show it immediately, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, agreed. Smart CA uses decades of weather data, which I was quite
Yeah.
interested to understand. And how does that transform the way companies plan shipments today?
Yeah, it changes really the way because they use all this weather data and run 10,000s of virtual shipments.
Hmm.
So now with all these extremes, we know when people say, what is the effect of climate change? You can see it, but you see it not when you look only at the average. When you say, my average temperature is 1.5 degrees higher. You see it from the extremes. So you can take the weather data from last week and see how this influences. Or, what we had in the US with minus 40 degrees cold, we can run it and see it and have it very updated. And we can also use, actual weather forecasts and run it before we ship. If we have a crucial shipment, we can see, is this heat wave in Australia now killing our product? We know it.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously you've talked a little bit there about digital twins, and in your opinion, how are digital twins and what role do they play in modern cold chain strategy, and how much more development have we got there in terms of the future outlook of digital twins, and what role they'll have?
Yeah, I think what we see, the digital twin is really from our, from our customers' perspective, an essential part of the planning. So they really do it. I can give you one example. One customer of us, Direct Relief, it's an NGO where we
Hmm.
also put a nice white paper on LinkedIn. They ship to crisis areas where where you have earthquakes, where we have all these things. And for each of the shipments, they make a simulation before. So they ship
Hmm.
nothing without a simulation and have reduced their excursions, their risk by 90%. And they go really in the harsh environments, where the question is not, do we have a cool dolly on the airport? Their question is, do we have still a functional airport? I mean,
Hmm.
that's a totally different question. What you have here. So and this is something what people really do.
Okay. And how is AI influencing simulations and modeling risk protection in your opinion? How's it affected you in the last 3, 4 years?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question because I got these questions quite a lot of time, and we also made in our last webinar a section about this because the main difference is what we see between a digital twin and an AI is, a digital twin is built on a structure, an AI is built on data. So in
Hmm.
principle, you can say, not a problem. We have data, But realistically, we have not so much data as we think.
Hmm.
Look at Amazon. They know everything about you, about me. So they own the data. But looking now in the pharma industry, if you are logistic company A, you will not share the data with company B. If
Mm.
you are a pharma company A, you will not share with pharma company B. So this means the data is very fragmented. It's in silos. So this is something what limits really the use of an AI. And what really a problem is, um, if you have data, do you have the right data? I mean, when you have collected always the inside temperature of your shipper, that's a flat line in most of the cases.
Yeah.
Do you have really collected the outside temperature, what really gives you a picture of the supply chain? So it's not only about the data, it's about the quality of the data. And what really a problem is, AI is really good in make plannings inside your data pool.
Hmm.
But if you come outside, like you made a lot of shipments in the morning, and you made blankets, and the question is, what happens if I ship in the afternoon?
Hmm.
And you can say, sorry guys, we have no data for this because we never made a shipment in the afternoon because this is what the AI should give us, but how the AI should know it. And this is where the digital twin comes in, because the digital twin have the biggest strengths in generating data because it comes from the structure of your supply chain. And out of the structure supply chain, you get all this data out. In
Yeah.
principle, you can use a digital twin to train an AI, but it makes not so much sense, to be honest, to have it and feed it back. But it's possible. But I mean,
Mm.
why we see in supply chain, it's always a big topic and a big question, but we see it not at the moment that the data is good enough. That's it.
Yeah, 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 I
Just answer
agree.
your question a little bit. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can only make good decisions with good data, and especially on performance of packaging. You're right. You don't really know what the packaging is doing unless you can see what's happening on the outside of the pallet or within the conditions versus inside. Otherwise, it's
yeah.
a fairly pointless number you're looking at. It doesn't really tell you a lot, does it?
And I mean, also, the question is, what happens if I miss a flight? And
Mm-mm.
if you have never missed a flight, how the AI should know what this means. The problem is sometimes that an AI starts to hallucinate and give you still an feedback, and then you are not clear. Is this really something you can trust?
Mm-hmm.
And we are an industry where we have really to trust on this data, because at the end of the day, there's a patient at the end of the supply chain. And if you make a big mistake, that's not only something, it's a financial loss. It could be really a serious problem for a patient.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think there's a time in the future when simulations become a regulatory expectation rather than sort of nice to have?
I would say yes, but I cannot foresee when this will be. So because when you come from automotive industry, where that simulation is a current standard, it's not something what is a nice to have.
Hmm.
And pharma is always on the fastest pace on these things because it's very regulated. People are not always going so fast in new technologies. But I think in the next 5 years, I would expect that it's minimum that people say, "Show me your digital twin approach." Besides the testing, to get really a feeling, oh, these free shipments will make it. Are they really representative? When you look at the 10,000 virtual ones, the free made it, but in the 10 virtual ones, you have 10% of excursions.
Hmm.
Then maybe an agency will look a little bit more critical on your validation process and say, you were the lucky one with the free. And I think what also maybe comes out in a kappa when you have an investigation to make. This is where we
Hmm.
see people have still struggle to identify root cause. The
Hmm.
digital way is something where you can come closer to the real root cause, because you can play around. Was the warehouse on the right temperature? Was the tarmac as long as planned? And these things. So, and
Hmm.
I think this is for me something where maybe also in the future an agency will look and say, hey, what scenarios you have looked in. It's not only, a lane risk assessment is not only a checklist. It should be really something what drives a decision. And this is also the target for us, that we say,
Hmm.
okay, we want to go away from we did risk assessment, low risk, high risk. We want to measure risk. Is it serious risk? Is it a small risk? And this so
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, interesting. I think something I wanted to ask you is what was one of the most challenging cold chains scenarios you've ever had to model over the
I
years?
would say most challenging, or the most crucial. I remember we with our customer direct relief. It was in Corona. It was May 2020, and they want to ship insulin from Santa Barbara to Addis Ababa to Ethiopia. And, at this time, all supply chains were really broken. And the question was, what happens if we miss the flight in Frankfurt when we go from US to Addis Ababa? Because they use a passive shipper with ice packs because it's a warm route. And the most fear was when they put this in a 5-degree storage, then you see in slow motion how you freeze your product or how you kill a product. And then we use the model and say, what you can do is leave the shipper out in Santa Barbara in the sun, put no product in for half a day. Then the cool packs are not so cold anymore. Put your product in, ship it.
Right. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
did it, and it worked. But that's a very uncommon approach, because
Yeah. Yeah.
if you do this and it goes wrong, then you have a little bit more things to explain. This, I think, was the most challenging. It was not challenging from the technology side, but it was really something. If this would go wrong, 4 tons of insulin will be lost. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
a very real story. What you feel without a digital model, no one will do this and say, let's try it out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, it's good. Yeah, it's a good one. Okay, and then I read an article around you've written around reefer containers
Yes.
and unplugs, and it's something that we're obviously quite strongly into as well. And in your opinion, what should shippers really know about power off and the risk there that maybe people aren't aware of at the moment, or the industry needs educating on?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We made last year a webinar together with Maersk, with Sebastian
Hmm.
Steinmüller, and showed a little bit. A power off is in reefer containers is not something what is uncommon, because it's part of the process. At some point, you have to put the container from the vessel or to the vessel. So naturally, you have to you have no power. And
Hmm.
this is what I see. It's part of the process. You have to plan it in, but it's also part of the process. You don't know exactly how long the power off is. So,
Hmm.
and you don't know exactly, like in a plane situation, I have a tarmac time and it's noon. In ocean, it's more like, oh, you have a power off time of, let's say, 2 hours, but I don't know when I will have this on the day, because
Hmm.
I don't know when the vessel arrives. And this is why the digital model comes in. It runs all the scenarios and shows you what is the worst case time of the day, the worst case scenario, that it can generate a problem. And then you can go back and say, maybe we need an extra protection, like your blankets, and put this around. And
Hmm.
know, in the case of a power off, I have this extra buffer, which saves me.
Hmm.
But I think what comes back is, if you do this real testing and you make an ocean shipment, you can always have the case you never see the power off on the worst case. Or you make
Yeah.
live shipments and do it for a year, and you feel we have no risk, nothing happens. The year later, you see a lot of excursion, nothing happens really. Maybe only your vessel arrives, I don't know, 5 hours later or earlier. And this is something what really can hit you hard.
Hmm.
You have a big amount of money in your container, $5-6 million sometimes.
Hmm.
So the probability is maybe small, but when this probability hits you, the impact is big.
And I think one of the problems with reefers is that people
Yeah.
don't quite understand. They don't have the data yet in terms of what happens inside a reefer when it's unplugged. So
Mhm.
let's say we've got a 25-degree ambient day and the reefer's unplugged for 6 hours. Obviously, you've got the mass of the product inside that reefer that has quite a big impact on what happens
Yeah.
inside. But
Yeah.
ultimately, we've seen test data where on, say, a 22-degree day, the reefer will go from 5 to, say, 9 degrees in quite a short period. Like, we're talking 4 hours. And then
Yes.
after 4 hours, it can climb to 10 and 11 degrees, which
Mhm.
obviously for 2 to 8 is no good. So, but I think there's quite limited data there still, because it's not something people have historically really run data loggers through any great sort of any great mass of information we have. And I think that's maybe something the industry is struggling with a little bit in terms of the correct data there, what happens inside reefers. And have you got a clearer picture? Because obviously you're dealing with a much wider scale in terms of information and customers.
Yeah, sure. Because we run thousands of virtual ocean container shipments, so we
Mm.
know what happens, and then the test is only to check if the assumptions are right. And we see, especially the sun is often completely underestimated. It's not like, oh, you're sitting in 20 degrees. Yes, but if you're sitting 20 degrees for 4 hours, and the sun is cooking your container
Yeah.
from the outside, that's the big thing. Then, a few hours more or less when you arrive makes the big impact. Temperature maybe is the same, but if you have 1,000 watts per square meter sun shining on your container, that could
Hmm.
be really very well. And especially I think the time constant is faster than most people think.
Yeah, I
As you
think it
mentioned,
is.
a few hours, and typically it depends how strict you are. If your product is still completely in label, then you run an issue. If you have some stability data, maybe you can cover it, but sometimes you don't like it to use the stability data for putting in your supply chain.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree.
Mhm.
So, just looking into the future, which emerging technologies excite you most over the next 5 years? What's coming down the road for us?
That's good. We're working on emerging and on innovative technology. What we see, I think, this is what we also now merge together with the a device from Elpro, where the digital twin runs with the shipment. I think this is what
Mm.
I see is for me the next element. Now we are super strong, I would say, in this planning phase, but in execution phase, we are still weaker. What we implemented there, we say, okay, the real-time logger gives you some information back every 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then the simulation runs with the shipment. So this overcomes the problem that you have a real-time device which tells you, sorry, Thomas, you have a problem now in Australia, you have 8.5 degrees.
Hmm.
What should you do? Nothing anymore because it's too late. And
Hmm.
and 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 this is what combination of our technology and the real-time device allows you to have this in advance. 24 hours, 48 hours upfront, when you will arrive in Australia, you
Hmm.
will have an excursion. So you
Hmm.
can now plan in Australia, maybe to book a warehouse or do something, but you have enough time to react on this.
How's it doing that prediction? Is that based on weather data and temperatures, or is it based on delays and possible foreseeing a delay at an airport that's already happened, or what are the
Both.
parameters?
It depends on the weather data. It depends on the packaging, because we are running the same model what we do now with the shipment.
Mm.
So if you have this blanket, then it runs with the shipment. So you can also see when it's hibernate and not. So this is running with the shipment. So and and this overcomes the problem. Also, I think we can run a lot of scenarios, but still we know in reality what happens if we miss the flight to a hurricane or whatever.
Mm.
And then we
Okay.
want to have this level of protection or intervention, which allows us to really save it. Not only
Yeah.
get a report, your product is now crucial, because at the end of the day, we want to have, let's say, that's my vision a little bit as a company, that no temperature excursions happens, but
Hmm.
not with overprotecting. Because
Mm.
excursions minimizing with an active container always plugged in, that's simple stuff. But
Mm.
that's a different area.
Yeah, yeah. I think we've spoken to a lot of guests about this, and everyone talks about predictive monitoring and etc. What you've described is what people want. If you can give them foresight in terms of what might happen in 24 hours time, and they can plan ahead and mitigate the risk, then it's a massive step for the industry, wouldn't it? So,
Mhm.
yeah, interesting times. If we sat down in 2-3 years time, Stefan, where do you want Smart CAE to be? What's the vision for the business over the next couple of years, and what do you want it to look like?
Our vision is a little bit that we have not to explain what we do, that people understand it immediately, and that's a little bit the common standard. So that's we work on this. We have 25 countries around the world. We have big customers. We work with a lot of big pharma companies and most of the packaging companies. So I think we are on a good way, but we are definitely not on the way that everyone has an idea what digital can do. I mean, that's for me the vision for the next 2-3 years. I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, good, it's a good clear one to have, and I agree with it. That's what I think what we all want more of as well. So yeah, good. And what's the single most important message you want listeners to take away from this conversation today?
I think the most important point is it's not something what is a future element what we do. There, knowledge is there. It's proven. It worked. It's not something where we have to think about, is this a technology? What it be in 5 years, 2 years, 3 years? So you can do it tomorrow. It's there.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
think it's available. It's the standard. So it's not something what needs to be invented now and say, we have to wait 5 years. That the technology is good enough. It's there. So
Yeah, no,
that's it.
for sure. Okay, so I know we're pretty much out of time here, but you were attending Logifarmer, I think, this year, so
Mhm.
people can meet you there. I presume, is there any other places people can get in contact with you, or sort of find out more about the software and what you got, how you can help them?
Yeah, sure. So we got Logic Pharma. Then we will be at the DHL conference in Boston. We'll be on a PDA conference on the 30th of April. So we'll be around. We go to the Logic Pharma US. So you can see a lot of events, and you can see also this on LinkedIn where I post regular what I'm doing, where I'm traveling, and see a little bit behind the scenes what we do with our digital coaching.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, Stefan, look, you've been a fantastic guest, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking through the system. You've got a personal fan of the software myself, so
Yeah, nice
thank
to
you.
hear, Thomas, and it was a
Yeah,
pleasure to be here and be part of your cool podcast here.
thank you. Good. Okay, so you've been listening to Cold Chain Insights. Thank you for listening. My name's Thomas Hunt. Please tune in next week for our next guest, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.